A suspicious fire claims the life of a small-town family man.
He had been burned very, very badly.
We started looking at surge protectors, the wires and everything. We didn't find anything like that.
You start to run scenarios through your head. Why wouldn't somebody wake up when there was a roaring fire right next to them?
Strange discoveries at the scene create new questions.
Usually you can see a burn pattern, but we didn't see nothing like that.
I start to think maybe they were poisoned.
Propofol is going to cause a person to sleep, and a sufficient concentration can lead to death.
The investigation reveals a family in crisis and a killer who will do anything to keep up appearances.
Her son stated that fights were happening more often. She didn't want people to know the truth.
She wanted to appear to be the perfect family, have the perfect home.
She stated very loudly that if she wanted to get rid of someone, she knew she could.
May 5th, 2018. It's a quiet Saturday morning in Centerville, Iowa. But for one local man, the weekend starts with an unexpected emergency.
Someone was leaving Centerville that morning. As he was leaving town, he drove by South Park and noticed smoke coming from the residence.
Centerville is a real close-knit community. Neighbors help each other out. He stopped, tried to see if there was anything he could do to render assistance.
Uncertain if anyone is inside the home, he calls 911.
Fire department, attention Mystic Fire Department. Please respond for mutual aid in Centerville for a house fire.
We knew that this was the home of Tim and Barb Pasa because their kids associated with my kids. As soon as they opened up the door, they was met with a dog that come running out and then heavy black smoke from floor to ceiling. Once they discovered that, they started to advance on down the hallway into the room where they seen some fire in there.
The fire at that point was contained primarily to a master bedroom on the southeast corner of the residence.
We're gonna go check the fire.
The blaze is extinguished before it engulfs the house, but as the smoke starts to settle, firefighters make a gruesome discovery.
They're advising somebody's in there. We need an ambulance. 1033. 10-4.
On the bed, they find the charred remains of a middle-aged man. Although the damage to his body is severe, first responders know the family well enough to recognize the victim is 50-year-old Tim Pasa.
Since we know that there's a body inside of the structure, it changes the content of everything. We got another team together, which ended up doing a search of the entire house because we got more people in here.
Several people tried to make contact with Barb. We didn't know where she was.
They just said that there's 2 kids. Are they accounted for?
We're checking underneath beds. We're checking on top of beds and everything.
We'll go there first. Okay, this room's clear. Bathroom's clear. You're good, clear. First floor's cleared. We're going to the basement. Copy that, going to the basement.
We're checking all the rooms just to clear and make sure that there's nobody else in the house.
She just said that there's 2 kids, and she was just wanting to make sure that they were accounted for.
They wasn't here. Barb, which was Tim's wife, was not in the house. We radioed that to our command, which is outside, let them know we've done a search and nobody else has been found.
It was shocking to me when I received that news that Tim had passed away. I'd known him for a long time, and when I was younger, just out of high school, we'd all spent a lot of time together. It was definitely not the phone call I expected to get that day.
Timothy Dale Pasa was born and raised in Centerville. He attended the only high school in town where he made lifelong friends.
I went to high school with Tim, and he was just an all-around good guy. He's the youngest of 4 children, I believe. Loved music, loved playing the guitar.
Tim and several other guys would come out to my parents' house and set up in the garage. He played the guitar as good as anybody I'd ever seen.
Music, I believe, was Tim's outlet. He ended up being a lead guitar player in a fabulous country band.
At one of his shows in 1999, Tim hit it off with a 25-year-old local named Barbara Glasscock.
Barb grew up in Centerville and graduated from Centerville High School. She worked as a nurse.
Once I got to know her, it didn't take long to realize that she was funny, she was witty.
She was more outgoing than Tim was. And she had told me that she loved to see him on stage. She loved his demeanor. He was calm to her storm. And that was something that attracted her to him.
Barb started showing up at all of Tim's shows, and the two quickly fell in love.
They got engaged in a few months and then got married. And then they started a family. Their son was in my son's class. And the daughter was also in my other son's class.
Tim was a very present father. He was at every single event that I attended. Anytime we spoke, he bragged up his kids. They were doing this and they were doing that.
Even from T-ball days when they played, he would always be, right at the fence watching and cheering on the boys. He was always involved, and his pride of them just shone through. They were his greatest gift.
Both Tim and Barb worked hard to provide for their growing family.
He was always working. He worked at Lockridge for several years and then became an EMT. And then he became a customer representative for Alliant Energy here in town.
Barb worked for Mercy One Medical Center here in Centerville. She was a nurse in the surgical unit.
I felt that she was a very caring nurse. She always seemed like she wanted to be there. She truly cared about the people she was taking care of.
After 11 years of marriage, the Pasas were doing so well that they bought and remodeled a home in an upscale neighborhood.
Barb and Tim seemed to have a great life, and she was so proud of her home. She always had pictures on Facebook. It seemed to be a well-rounded family.
But now, their picture-perfect life has gone up in smoke. Firefighters have just found Tim's dead body in the smoking ruins. Both the police and fire departments are anxious to know how it happened.
People had been trying to call Barb to let her know that the house was on fire, and she didn't answer them.
Once the fire was contained and extinguished, then firefighters at that point removed the body of Tim Pasa from the residence.
They had a lot of trouble with it just because of the size. Tim was a big individual. I just start looking around the room, see if I see anything else. I noticed a candle on the left side of the bed, which would have been opposite side of where we found the victim at. It was actually down on the floor. That was a little suspicious.
We noticed that a smoke alarm inside the master bedroom area was on the ground. The battery was out of the battery compartment, and the smoke alarm was not melted or burned like you would see in a typical fire. We also noticed on the opposite side of the house a separate smoke alarm between the two kids' bedrooms. The battery compartment was open, making it inactive.
These were just some things that kind of stuck out to me as red flags, because this is not normal stuff that you usually see.
You start to run scenarios through your head and start to try to figure out, what could have happened here? Was it an accident or was it purposefully set?
Coming up, Barb Pasa blames herself for her husband's death.
I said, we found a candle in there. Do you know why it was in there? She said, I lit it.
But an autopsy reveals the shocking truth.
They found no smoke inhalation in Tim's lungs.
On May 5th, 2018, police and fire investigators are working to determine the cause of the deadly blaze that killed Tim Pasa at his home. His wife Barb rushes home after learning about the fire.
People had been calling her, but she said that she didn't have self-service where she was, traveling to the soccer game. Eventually, she did answer one from her daughter, who was on the school bus, had received information, too, that their house was on fire.
Once she did finally arrive on scene, I went and made contact with her and advised her of Tim's death. When I relayed that Tim had passed, Barb didn't seem to have any emotion. I think we all chalked it up to shock and overwhelming situations that morning.
People grieve differently. We don't know what's going through her mind at that time. Officers in the fire department started kind of talking with Barb, trying to put together how the things had transpired before she left. She told them that she had left earlier in the morning to go to her kids' soccer tournament. She had stayed up the night. It would have been Friday night, late, until about midnight. She was baking cookies, but making snacks and things like that to take to the soccer tournament. She went to bed, and then about 5:30 a.m. she woke up, again, started making breakfast for the kids to get them ready for their soccer meet. About 6 a.m. the kids woke up. They had breakfast that Barb had prepared for them.
She said she left the residence between 6:50 a.m. and 7 a.m. that morning. It was predetermined that Tim was not going to go to the soccer match that day. When Barb left the residence, Tim was asleep in bed and snoring.
When they ask Barb if she knows why the smoke detectors were disarmed, she says that was her fault.
She said something had burned while she was in the process of baking and set off the smoke alarms. And so she asked Tim to take the batteries out of the smoke alarms until they could get the smoke cleared out of the room. That made sense. I think most of us have probably done that in our house at some point.
I said, we found a candle in there. Do you know why it was in there? She said, I lit it. I don't remember if it was on the bathroom sink or if I put it on the end table in the bedroom. The reason I put it there and I lit it was because the dog was in there and the dog peed on the carpet and it was kind of covering up the smell.
After answering investigators' questions, Barb asks to see her husband's body.
I explained to Barb that Tim was in the ambulance and that he had been burned very, very badly. She was insistent on spending some time with him.
Barb had told Assistant Chief Moore that, I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for a long time. I've seen things like this. This is my husband, and I want to see him before he's taken away. We see that a lot with family members, that they do want to see their loved ones at the scene rather than maybe later at a funeral home.
I decided to let her go into the ambulance, and I gave her a couple minutes to spend alone with Tim.
When she came out, we were waiting for her, and she was very stoic. I just thought she was in shock. She didn't show a lot of emotion, and I was concerned that when she broke, it was going to be bad.
Anytime there's a death where it's not under doctor supervision, an autopsy is going to be completed to determine the cause of death, to get the answers needed. When I told Barb that an autopsy would be conducted, she became almost mad that it was going to be conducted and she had no say in that. I thought Barb's reaction to that was not typical. I just felt that maybe she was being overwhelmed with everything that had gone on that morning.
Despite Barb's reservations, Tim's body is transported to a funeral home in preparation for the autopsy.
Barb had said she was going to her mom, she was taking the kids there, and that she would be staying there.
At that point, we were not able to determine if the fire was started because of the candle or if it had any relevance to the fire. But we knew where the items were found and located, and it was just something suspicious in nature.
I went back in to look on the end table to see if I could see the markings where the candle actually was setting before it was, in case it was moving up. I could not find it, so it was really, really puzzling to me. We start looking at all the electronic surge protectors, the wires and everything. They look and see if there's any possibility of where that stuff could have shorted out. In this case, we didn't find anything like that.
The fire marshal determines that the candle Barb Pasa put in the bedroom isn't to blame either.
He had told us that, in his opinion, that the fire had burned rapidly, more so on top of the bed, and is also on the side of the bed where Tim was sleeping, which was the opposite side of where this candle was.
Investigators face another mystery.
In a situation like that, whenever there's fire, especially if it's on your person or it's somewhere, you're going to be moving to get away from it.
Even if a smoke alarm didn't go off, the smoke, the heat, and the flames would have woken somebody up. And there was no indication that that happened. And that was another little part of an investigation that piques your interest as to why. Why wouldn't somebody wake up when there was a roaring fire right next to them? Things just kind of started looking a little more suspicious.
Three days after the fire that claimed the life of Tim Pasa, Centerville authorities are hoping an autopsy will provide answers.
The one big question is what is the autopsy going to show us as far as the nature and the cause of death? As part of that autopsy, they do a full examination of the body. They wanted to make sure that there were no obvious signs of death, such as stab wounds, bullet wounds, in general like that. All of those things were ruled out.
While there are no immediate signs of foul play, the medical examiner does note something unexpected.
They found no smoke inhalation in Tim's lungs. That was the key piece of information that we were looking for, because for that to happen, Tim had to have been deceased before the fire.
Barb had told us that when she had left the residence, Tim was asleep in bed and snoring. That was not possible. Tim was already deceased when she left the residence. There was no natural reason, no indication of bad health or heart attack or any such nature. Now we need to determine what actually took place that morning.
That completely changes our investigation into a homicide investigation.
In light of this development, police wonder if Barb's lack of emotion at the scene wasn't shock, but the reaction of a guilty conscience.
You start putting these pieces together that is going to start moving us towards a criminal investigation. I start to think of, something had happened to incapacitate them where they were not able to wake up. Maybe they were poisoned. It was determined that Barb was diabetic, and so we did find a lot of diabetic medication, insulin, syringes throughout the house.
We informed the medical examiner of the vials of insulin that were found at the residence and gave him that information to try to locate in the toxicology report insulin in Tim's body. At that point, they were not able to locate any insulin in the toxicology.
As far as investigators are concerned, Barb is now a person of interest in a potential murder. The question is, what reason could she have to want her husband dead?
Later that night, I was contacted by a family member of the Pasas who advised me that Tim and Barb's son wished to speak with me in regards to the fire and Tim's death. I agreed to meet with Tim and Barb's son later that evening at the Law Center in Centerville. He advised that the evening before the fire, him and his father, Tim, had gone on a walk together, and Tim had expressed to him that they were going to be getting a divorce and that was going to be taking place sooner rather than later. Tim and Barb's son was very distraught and upset. He stated that it hadn't been good for quite some time, that fights were happening more often than not. It was apparent that he truly believed that Barb may have had something to do with Tim's death.
I've been around Centerville my whole life, and there's been very few intentional homicides in this community. But the original picture that you have starts to change. From what we saw at the very beginning to where we were now was substantially different.
Coming up, a marriage on the brink of disaster.
We probably lived paycheck to paycheck. We got behind on our mortgage and had to refinance.
And detectives find the smoking gun.
That conversation led the laboratory to test for a drug called propofol.
Officers now have a suspect in the fiery murder of Tim Pasa, his wife of 18 years, Barbara Pasa. To understand her motive, detectives need to know just how deep the problems in their marriage go.
Generally, you want to speak with friends and family members and try to see what you can come up with. One of those in particular was Sonia Carson. She had reached out and she had some information that she thought maybe we would want to know.
I knew Barb all through when she was in school. 2004, 2005 is when we became closer friends. Barb and Tim were never an affectionate couple. Even when the kids were younger, they never were one to touch each other or show affection. I just thought that was Barb's demeanor. She wasn't really an emotional person. And I think if she would have been more affectionate, Tim would reciprocate that.
According to Sonia, Tim and Barb's relationship continued to deteriorate over the years.
I think they stayed together for the kids, but primarily just for them. And I think Barb, she did not want to have a marriage that ended in divorce. In her eyes, she would have felt like she wouldn't be accepted or that she wouldn't be able to do things with us as couples as we sometimes did because of our children.
Their relationship seemed to reach a breaking point in 2018, 2 weeks before the fire.
We had gone out to eat one evening, and there were 3 of us, and we were just sitting there talking about, life, our kids, our husbands, and out of the blue, she stated very loudly that she was very upset with Tim. She talked about a pending divorce and how she was concerned if the kids would actually want to stay with her or if they would want to be with Tim, and she was concerned about their finances.
I think she really wanted people to know how much she was giving or how much she was doing. I believe she was trying to portray herself to be the perfect mom and the perfect family.
Barb always wanted the kids to have the best of everything. And, they drove nice cars. They had newest shoes or whatever that they wanted. She also spent a lot of time shopping for herself and also for friends. Spending money was one of her favorite things to do. She continued to become more upset about it and said that she hated him. She said it with a lot of emotion, and that if she wanted to get rid of someone, she knew she could. When she said that, I kind of chuckled because I thought, I'm sure we've all been mad at our husbands and have said that. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought she was venting.
Investigators wonder if Barb decided to make good on her threat.
We found documentation showing that the house was about to go into foreclosure. We saw credit card bills that were way past due. Barb had maxed out Tim's life insurance from $50,000 to $200,000. That had happened approximately 5 months prior to this incident. We were also able to determine that she had increased the amount on the homeowner's insurance for the residents. Knowing how far Barb and Tim were in a financial struggle, Tim was worth a lot more to her dead than alive. She was going to, quite frankly, make a good payday upon his death.
Barb's motive seems clear, but there is still no direct evidence she had anything to do with Tim's death.
A lot of it was circumstantial evidence. We needed to try to get Barb to answer our questions and tell us the truth about what took place that morning.
Investigators ask Barb to come in for a more formal round of questioning.
Hi, Barb.
Hey. You can sir.
You better not sit that close to me.
I don't think you smell pretty good.
We wanted to get a baseline from Barb about her relationship with Tim and the family setting. Barb did admit that her and Tim had talked for quite some time about getting a divorce, but that financially she didn't know how that would work.
We probably lived paycheck to paycheck. We got behind on our mortgage and had to refinance, and some creditors.
Were you guys able to find common ground at least to get that handled?
He handled the bills for a while, and then he got tired of it and kind of half-ass handed them back to me.
Aside from confirming what police already know, Barb is not very forthcoming.
She was fine speaking with us about the relationship and the financial situation. But when we pressed her about the morning of the fire, she just started to close up.
What was the breaking point for you?
I don't have anything to say. I didn't have a breaking point.
You understand where I'm coming from?
I do.
Right? You watch the TV shows. You're in the medical field. You know they're going to be able to do toxicology and figure out what happened with him. That's going to come back on you. The fire didn't destroy his body. That's going to come back to you, and then it's just going to be evidence. I'm here so I can understand. Take me through it. What led up to that decision? Because we know...
There was no decision.
She asked to stop the interview. She told them that she wanted to go speak to her children and talk to them, and then she would come back.
It was my belief that she knew at that point that she was caught, and she wanted to tell the kids what took place before she admitted to what she had done. Prior to Barb leaving the law center the day of the interview, we executed the search warrant of her vehicle and also seized her cell phone for a search warrant to be conducted on the cell phone.
The following morning, while waiting for Barb to return, investigators receive a shocking call.
At approximately 8 in the morning, dispatch received a 911 call from the mother's residence advising that Barb was having seizure-like symptoms. I recognized the address and I went to the location and observed Barb was overdosing. At that point, she was transferred to a hospital in Des Moines.
Barb had taken some type of overdose of medications. She was kept for about 10 days under observation.
Of course, in a small town, people are talking. A lot of people questioned, is she grieving? Is it because she's so heartbroken? But at this point, even though it was a few short days after Tim's passing, it was pretty evident that most people believed that it was because she was guilty of a crime that she'd committed.
With Barb Pasa in the hospital recovering from an overdose, police focus on finding evidence that she orchestrated her husband's death.
After the initial autopsy report and toxicology test did not reveal anything, we asked for an additional toxicology test to look further into other substances that may have been in his body.
The case history was that Barbara Pasa was a nurse in a medical field and had access to some of the drugs that are specifically used for anesthesia. That conversation led the laboratory to test for a drug called propofol.
Propofol is a fast-acting drug that is most commonly used to sedate patients undergoing surgery.
The injection of propofol is going to cause a person to sleep, and it can also affect the heart and lower blood pressure. It can cause an individual to stop breathing, and a sufficient concentration can lead to death.
The amount of propofol found in Tim's body was 0.18 milliliters, which is not something that a normal person would have in their system.
That analytical finding is the propofol that's present in the blood. It doesn't go to show you where the propofol is present in other parts of the body. So the finding in the blood does not account for the propofol dose that was administered.
We did interviews. We were able to determine that Tim was not a drug user. Tim was not in the medical field.
It's clear to investigators that Barb was the only person in the Pasa household that had direct access to propofol.
They spoke with hospital officials. When propofol is used, if it's in a vial and say it's 10 milliliters and they only used 5, it can only be used one time, so it was thrown in the trash.
Barb's job in the surgical center was to then dispose of those containers. The containers are such that Barb would be able to reach in and grab the small vial of propofol, stick it in a pocket, and no one would know anything different.
With Barb's access to the drug confirmed, investigators re-examine her timeline. On the morning of the fire, Barb told police she left the house a little before 7 a.m., more than 30 minutes before the fire was reported. But when police reach out to Barb's coworker, Megan DeCina, she says otherwise.
On the morning of May 5th, as I was driving to work, I happened to notice that Barb's vehicle was at home. I knew it was her vehicle based on the personalized plates that she had that spelled out Pasa.
Megan has an app on her phone that she uses for her work, and it tracks where she's at certain times. She showed us this app, and it showed that she had been by that house at about 7:22 that morning. About 10 minutes later, 7:33 or thereabouts is when the 911 call was made that there was smoke coming out of the house. That's a pretty short period of time for somebody to be there and then gone, and that also starts to tell me that fire might have been going for a while before she actually left the house.
Detectives are able to track her movements after leaving the house using her financial records.
that morning, she had gone to a ATM location here in Centerville and withdrew $200 from that ATM. We were able to also get video from that ATM, which proved it was Barb and that she was in her vehicle at 7:25 a.m. in Centerville. So having all this evidence between the autopsy, the interview, the different statements, the financial information, all led us to Barb was not being truthful with us and that Barb was involved in the death of Tim and the fire at the residence.
Armed with more solid evidence, investigators present their case to the district attorney.
I think Barb is in a bad place financially. She wanted to appear to be the perfect family, have the perfect home, the perfect cars. And I think it got to the point where she was not going to be able to uphold that appearance. And that's why she did what she did.
Barb snapped because she didn't want people to know the truth. She didn't want them to know that her life was not as it was portrayed. So based on our investigation in this case, we believe that sometime in the early morning, Barb was able to inject Tim with propofol. Once that took place, Barb then decided to try to destroy all possible evidence.
If we suspect that it was arson or whatever, usually you can see a burn pattern, but we didn't see nothing like that. So I believe that she stacked stuff up on top of him, let it be clothes, pillows, or whatever, started it on fire. I believe her intent was to burn the house down or burn it the long resignation where you couldn't see what was happening and then leave.
At this point, we believe we had enough probable cause to make an arrest for the murder and the arson.
While investigators have been gathering evidence, Barb Pasa has been in a hospital bed recovering from an overdose. When she's released on May 18, 2018, officers are waiting to arrest her.
Barb was placed under arrest and charged with the murder of Tim Pasa as well as arson.
It's a small town, so you start hearing things, about, well, I heard there was no smoke in his lungs and things like that. So when I heard that she'd got arrested, I was not surprised at all. I really wasn't. Angry, yes. Surprised, no.
Barb's trial begins on September 17, 2019, more than a year after the crimes took place.
Barb pleaded not guilty. At that point, she was looking at life in jail without parole on just the murder alone, plus the arson charges.
But prosecutors know their case is still largely circumstantial.
You have to convince the full jury, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the person that was charged committed the crimes that were alleged. We didn't have video of Barb lighting the fire. We have to prove that the information we have, based off of all of our investigation, leads to nobody else. It had to be her.
According to the defense, police arrested the wrong person.
One of the defenses that Barb tried to use was that her neighbor, who is also a nurse and deals with anesthesiologists, was someone that could have possibly entered the residence and injected Tim with the propofol.
There just was nothing that we found that ever showed he was involved in it.
It was determined that he actually left at 5:30 that morning of the incident to head to Des Moines for a conference. He was not around that day.
Barb chose to take the stand in her defense. She did show some emotion throughout her testimony, which was not similar to what we had seen throughout this investigation. She talked about in her previous marriage that she had lost a child at some point, which definitely is a traumatic experience.
I think she truly wanted to convince people that she was not the evil person that everybody knows that she is, by saying that she could not do that to her children or do that to Tim.
The tears that she was given, all phony. The entire thing was phony.
The question for the jury is whether or not they believe her.
The jury ended up deliberating for approximately 3 hours, came back with guilty verdicts for first-degree murder and first-degree arson, which ultimately gave Barb a life sentence plus 20 years.
In my opinion, this woman is a psychopath. Lucky for us, she's not a very smart psychopath. If she was as smart as she thought she would, Tim would have had smoke in his lungs. She didn't think that part out.
I think as a community, it kind of maybe opened some eyes a little bit more, knowing that maybe everything isn't exactly how it's portrayed.
Even though she got sent to prison for murder and arson, that was not a win. It's very sad that these children lost a father and a mother both. And the kids will remember this forever, and it's just a very, very sad ordeal.
All of them had a common interest in music. Hopefully they still do. I think they do. But he could have nurtured that a lot more had he been around and been involved with their life. And she robbed him of that.
Tim should be remembered for the great dad he was, and for the connections he had with his kids, and just how proud he was all the time of them. He would be beyond proud of the lives they're living and all their successes.
The quiet streets of Centerville, Iowa, in the late spring of 2018, presented an image of classic American tranquility. In small towns across the country, life often moves at a predictable, comforting pace. Neighbors know one another by name, children grow up attending the same schools, and there is a shared understanding of mutual trust and security. Timothy Dale Pasa was a product of this close-knit environment. Born and raised in Centerville, he was a man whose life was deeply woven into the fabric of the community. He was the youngest of several siblings, a quiet and gentle soul who found his greatest joy in two things: his children and his music. For Timothy, playing the guitar was not merely a hobby, but a profound form of personal expression. He was highly regarded as an exceptionally talented lead guitarist, performing with popular local country bands and bringing joy to audiences throughout the region. To those who knew him, Timothy was a calm, steady presence, always ready with a warm smile and a supportive word for his family and friends. In the year 1999, Timothy met Barbara Glasscock, a 25-year-old local resident who worked as a nurse. Barbara was outgoing, witty, and possessed a vibrant personality that seemed to complement Timothy's quiet nature. She was drawn to his calm demeanor, often referring to him as the steady presence in her life. The two fell in love quickly, became engaged within a few months, and married shortly thereafter. Over the next 18 years, they built a life together, raising two children who became the center of Timothy's world. He was an incredibly dedicated father, present at every baseball game, school event, and soccer match, cheering enthusiastically from the sidelines. Both worked hard to provide for their growing family. Timothy served for several years as an emergency medical technician, helping those in need during times of medical crisis, before transitioning to a position as a customer representative for a regional energy utility. Barbara continued her career in the medical field, working as a highly respected nurse in the surgical unit of a local hospital. To the outside world, they appeared to be the epitome of a successful, well-rounded family, living in a beautifully remodeled home in an upscale neighborhood. However, behind the polished facade of social media posts and beautiful home decorations, a severe domestic and financial storm was brewing. The pressure to maintain an appearance of effortless success and material prosperity can sometimes create an unsustainable psychological burden. In the case of the Pasa family, this pressure began to manifest in deep financial distress. Despite their steady incomes, the family was living far beyond their means. Investigators would later discover that they were falling significantly behind on their mortgage payments, and their beautiful home was on the verge of foreclosure. Credit card bills were mounting, and many accounts were past due. Along with these financial worries, the marital relationship was rapidly deteriorating. The calm and steady partnership that had once defined their early years had given way to frequent and intense arguments. Timothy and Barbara were increasingly unable to find common ground, and the tension in the household was becoming palpable, even to their children. On the evening of May 4th, 2018, Timothy took a walk with his son. During this quiet moment away from the tension of the house, Timothy opened up about the reality of his situation, confiding in his son that he was planning to seek a divorce in the near future. This was a significant step for Timothy, a man who had always sought to maintain peace and stability for his family. He recognized that the marriage had reached a breaking point and that a formal separation was the only healthy path forward. Tragically, Timothy would never have the opportunity to take that step. The following morning, on Saturday, May 5th, 2018, the illusion of the peaceful Pasa household was shattered. Early in the morning, a local resident was driving near South Park when he noticed thick black smoke billowing from the Pasa residence. Demonstrating the neighborly concern that defines Centerville, the driver immediately stopped to see if he could render assistance. Realizing that the situation was critical and uncertain, if anyone was inside, he called the emergency services line by dialing 911. Within minutes, the Centerville Fire Department arrived at the scene. When firefighters opened the door, they were met with a wall of heavy black smoke stretching from the floor to the ceiling. A dog ran out of the house, but the dense, choking smoke made it difficult to see inside. Bravely advancing down the hallway, the firefighters traced the source of the fire to the master bedroom, located on the southeast corner of the residence. They were able to quickly contain and extinguish the flames before they could consume the rest of the house. However, as the smoke began to clear, they made a grim and devastating discovery. On the bed lay the charred remains of a man, subsequently identified as 50-year-old Timothy de la Pasa. The severity of the damage to his body was immense, and the scene immediately shifted from a standard fire emergency to a highly sensitive investigation. As the police and fire investigators began their work, they immediately noticed several unusual details that raised serious questions. In any fire scene, investigators look for typical progression patterns and safety features. In this instance, the anomalies were striking. One of the most significant red flags was the complete silence of the home's safety systems. No smoke alarms were sounding. Upon closer examination, investigators found a smoke detector lying on the bedroom floor. Curiously, its battery had been removed and was lying next to it. The detector itself showed no signs of heat damage or melting, which strongly suggested it had been placed on the floor before the fire started. Furthermore, another smoke detector, located in the hallway near the children's bedrooms, was also found deactivated, with its battery compartment open. In addition to the disabled safety systems, investigators discovered a candle on the floor on the opposite side of the bedroom from where Timothy's body was found. This was highly unusual, as candles are typically placed on elevated, stable surfaces rather than on the floor in a corner. These physical clues disrupted the narrative of an accidental fire. In a typical accidental fire, the heat, smoke, and flames would naturally awaken a sleeping person, prompting instinctive attempts to escape or protect oneself. Yet, Timothy lay completely still on his bed, showing no signs of defensive movement or attempts to flee. This suggested that he was either in a state of profound unconsciousness or already deceased when the fire began. When Barbara Pasa arrived at the scene, having been contacted about the emergency, she appeared stoic and showed very little outward emotion. While investigators and members of the community initially rationalized this reaction as a symptom of severe shock, her subsequent explanations for the oddities at the scene began to raise further questions. She claimed that she had left the house around 7 in the morning to drive her children to an out-of-town soccer tournament. She explained that she had stayed up late the previous night, baking cookies and snacks, and had woken up at 5:30 in the morning to prepare breakfast. According to her account, Timothy was alive, asleep, and snoring when she departed. Regarding the deactivated smoke detectors, Barbara explained that she had accidentally burned some food while baking the night before, which had triggered the alarms. She stated that she had asked Timothy to remove the batteries to clear the smoke, and they had simply not been replaced. She also claimed she had lit the candle and placed it on the floor to mask an odor left by their dog. While these explanations sounded plausible in isolation, they began to conflict with the scientific evidence that was rapidly emerging. The most critical turning point in the case came with the results of the forensic autopsy. The medical examiner made a monumentally important discovery. There was absolutely no soot, smoke, or carbon monoxide in Timothy's lungs. When a living person is exposed to a fire, their natural respiration causes them to inhale the toxic gases and particulate matter produced by combustion. The absence of these substances in Timothy's respiratory tract proved scientifically that he had stopped breathing before the fire ever started. This directly contradicted Barbara's statement that her husband was snoring and alive when she left the house. The investigation was immediately elevated to a homicide inquiry. As investigators dug deeper into the family's circumstances, they uncovered a compelling motive rooted in financial desperation and marital discord. In addition to the pending foreclosure and credit card debt, financial records revealed that Barbara had recently made significant changes to their insurance policies. Approximately 5 months prior to the fire, she had increased Timothy's life insurance coverage from $50,000 to $200,000. She had also increased the homeowner's insurance policy. These actions suggested a calculated plan to secure a major financial payout upon Timothy's death and the destruction of the property, providing a clear incentive for her actions. Witness testimony further supported the theory of premeditation. Sonia Carson, a close friend, recalled a dinner conversation that took place approximately 2 weeks before the tragedy. During this gathering, Barbara spoke with intense resentment about her husband, expressing anger over the impending divorce and worrying about her social and financial standing. She loudly stated that if she wanted to get rid of someone, she had the knowledge to do so. Although her friends initially dismissed this as a dramatic venting of frustration, the statement took on a chilling significance in light of subsequent events. Given Barbara S.'s profession as a surgical circulating nurse, investigators recognized that she had unique access to medical environments and pharmaceutical substances. Although an initial search of the home revealed various insulin vials and syringes, toxicological analysis for insulin was negative. Recognizing that they needed to look for substances specifically used in surgical settings, investigators requested that the forensic laboratory perform a specialized screening. This targeted testing revealed the presence of propofol in Timothy's system. Propofol is a potent, fast-acting anesthetic agent used to induce and maintain sedation during surgery. It is a highly restricted substance that must be administered with precise clinical monitoring, as it can rapidly suppress respiration and lower blood pressure, leading to death if unmonitored. Timothy had no medical training or access to such drugs. However, Barbara S.'s daily duties in the operating room involved disposing of partially used medication vials. This position allowed her to easily divert the substance without attracting attention from her colleagues. To further solidify their case, investigators meticulously reconstructed the timeline of the morning of the fire. Barbara claimed to have left the residence before 7 in the morning. However, a coworker who was driving to work noticed Barbara S.'s vehicle parked at the residence at 7:22 in the morning. This observation was supported by a location tracking application on the coworker S. mobile phone. Just minutes later, at 7:25 in the morning, security footage from a local automated teller machine recorded Barbara withdrawing $200. The emergency call reporting the fire was placed at 7:33 in the morning. This highly compressed timeline proved that Barbara was present at the home immediately before the fire erupted, completely dismantling her alibi. As the physical, digital, and scientific evidence began to coalesce, Barbara attempted to avoid the consequences of her actions by taking an overdose of medication, which resulted in her hospitalization for 10 days. Upon her release on May 18, 2018, she was immediately arrested and charged with first-degree murder and first-degree arson. Her trial began in September of 2019. Although she pleaded not guilty, and her defense attempted to cast suspicion on a neighbor, the prosecution's presentation of the physical evidence, the pharmaceutical findings, and the digital timeline was overwhelming. After only 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on both counts. Barbara was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, with an additional 20 years for the arson charge. This tragic case offers profound lessons about human psychology, the dangers of deceptive appearances, and the importance of community vigilance. It serves as a stark warning that severe domestic and financial pressures must be addressed through open, honest communication, professional mediation, or legal separation, rather than through desperate and destructive acts. The tragedy underscores the fact that prioritizing outward social validation over internal well-being can lead to catastrophic consequences. For law enforcement, the successful resolution of this case highlights the critical importance of meticulous scene documentation, objective analysis of physical anomalies, and the integration of specialized forensic science with digital metadata. By looking beyond the obvious and questioning explanations that conflict with physical laws, investigators can uncover the truth even in highly complex cases. Ultimately, the cooperative efforts of the Centerville police, fire investigators, and forensic scientists ensured that justice was served, honoring the memory of Timothy Dale Pasa as a loving father and a valued member of his community, while offering a sobering educational reminder to all. In the quiet and historically peaceful town of Centerville, Iowa, the rhythm of daily life has long been defined by its close-knit community and the mutual trust shared among its residents. In this small town, neighbors genuinely watch out for one another, families grow up together, and the safety of the community is a shared value that people deeply cherish. However, on the morning of May 5, 2018, this tranquility was abruptly shattered by a devastating event that would expose a chilling contrast between outward appearances and a dark, hidden reality. The tragic incident began as a suspected accidental house fire, but rapidly evolved into one of the most shocking homicide investigations in the history of the region. The event unfolded on a quiet Saturday morning when a local resident was driving near South Park as he was leaving town. As he passed by the intersection near the park, his attention was drawn to a plume of thick, heavy black smoke rising from a local residence on South Park Avenue. Recognizing the potential for a catastrophic emergency, and understanding that in a small town like Centerville, every second counts, the passing citizen immediately stopped his vehicle to render assistance. With no immediate way of knowing if anyone was trapped inside the rapidly filling structure, he promptly contacted the Emergency Response Center by dialing 911. When the local fire department and first responders arrived at the scene, they immediately recognized the home as the residence of Timothy and Barbara Pasa. The firefighters and local police officers knew the family well, as their children attended the same schools and participated in the same local activities. Upon breaching the front entrance of the home, the emergency responders were met with a wall of dense black smoke that extended from the floor to the ceiling. As the door opened, the family dog came running out of the house, seeking safety from the hazardous conditions inside. The firefighters advanced down the hallway toward the master bedroom, located on the southeast corner of the residence, which was identified as the primary source of the fire. Through the heavy smoke, they located active flames centered around the bed. Acting with swift precision, the fire crews suppressed the blaze before it could spread to the rest of the house, preventing the entire structure from being consumed. However, as the thick smoke began to clear, the first responders made a grim discovery on the master bed. They found the heavily burned remains of a middle-aged man. Despite the severe damage caused by the heat and flames, the responders recognized the victim as 50-year-old Timothy Pasa, a beloved husband and father who was well known throughout the community. The discovery of a deceased individual immediately altered the nature of the emergency operation, transforming it from a standard fire response into a potential crime scene investigation. A secondary, highly thorough search of the entire residence was initiated to ensure that no other family members were trapped or injured inside. Teams of officers and firefighters systematically cleared every room on the first floor, searched under beds, inspected the bathrooms, and descended into the basement. At the same time, community members and officers attempted to contact Barbara Pasa to notify her of the emergency, but she did not initially answer her telephone. Fortunately, the secondary search confirmed that neither Barbara nor their 2 children were inside the house during the incident. To fully understand the gravity of this tragedy, it is necessary to examine the life of Timothy Pasa and the history of his relationship with his wife. Timothy, affectionately known as Tim to his friends and family, was born and raised in Centerville. He graduated from the local high school, where he developed lifelong friendships and was remembered as an exceptionally kind, easygoing, and genuine individual. Timothy possessed a deep love for country music and was a highly talented self-taught lead guitarist. He spent years performing in a popular local country band, showcasing a level of musical skill that amazed his peers. For Timothy, playing the guitar was not merely a hobby, but a vital creative outlet through which he connected with others. It was during one of his musical performances in the year 1999 that Timothy met 25-year-old Barbara Glasscock, a local resident who worked as a nurse. Barbara was drawn to Timothy's calm, steady demeanor, which she often described as the perfect counterbalance to her own outgoing and sometimes tempestuous personality. The couple fell in love, became engaged within a few months, and eventually married, establishing their household in Centerville and welcoming 2 children, a son and a daughter, into their lives. As a father, Timothy was deeply devoted and exceptionally present. Neighbors and friends recalled seeing him at every youth baseball game, standing close to the fence, cheering enthusiastically for his children. He took immense pride in their achievements, frequently bragging about their academic and athletic successes to anyone he met. To those who observed the family, Timothy and Barbara appeared to have built an enviable and highly stable life. Barbara worked diligently as a surgical nurse at Mercy One Medical Center, where she was regarded as a highly caring and professional caregiver, while Timothy worked as a customer service representative for Alliant Energy, having previously served as an emergency medical technician. After 11 years of marriage, the family purchased and beautifully remodeled a home in an upscale neighborhood, a milestone that Barbara proudly displayed through numerous photographs on social media platforms, creating the public impression of a harmonious and prosperous family. However, behind this carefully constructed digital facade lay severe financial distress and deep marital discord. As investigators began their detailed examination of the fire scene, several highly unusual details, or red flags, quickly emerged. While investigating the master bedroom, the local assistant fire chief noticed a candle sitting on the floor on the opposite side of the bed from where Timothy was found. This placement was highly unusual for a candle meant to provide scent or light. Furthermore, the master bedroom smoke alarm was found lying on the floor, completely undamaged by the heat, with its battery compartment open and the battery entirely removed. Upon inspecting the rest of the house, investigators discovered that the smoke detector located in the hallway between the children's bedrooms had also been disabled, with its battery compartment open and inactive. These discoveries raised serious questions for the investigators. In a typical house fire, smoke detectors are either melted by intense heat or remain fixed to the ceiling, sounding an alarm. Finding multiple disabled smoke alarms in different areas of the house suggested deliberate human intervention. Furthermore, seasoned investigators knew that under normal circumstances, the intense heat, smoke, and flames of a rapid bedroom fire would inevitably awaken a sleeping person, triggering an instinctual attempt to escape. The fact that Timothy had remained in the bed without any sign of movement suggested that he may have been incapacitated before the fire even began. The investigation took a more suspicious turn when Barbara Pasa arrived at the scene. She had been traveling to a youth soccer tournament in another town and claimed that her lack of immediate response to phone calls was due to poor cellular service. She stated that she had finally learned of the fire from her daughter, who had received a call while riding on a school bus. Upon being informed of her husband's passing by the police officers at the scene, Barbara displayed a striking lack of visible emotion. While first responders initially attributed this calm demeanor to profound shock, her subsequent interactions, they Kepite hot authorities, began to tell a different story. During her initial interview, Barbara provided a detailed timeline of her actions leading up to the fire. She claimed that she had stayed up late on Friday night until approximately midnight, baking cookies and preparing snacks for her children's weekend athletic events. She stated that she woke up at 5:30 in the morning, prepared breakfast for her children, and woke them up at 6 in the morning. According to her account, she and the children departed the home between 6:50 in the morning and 7 in the morning, leaving Timothy asleep in bed and snoring. When asked about the disabled smoke detectors, Barbara claimed that she had accidentally burned some food while baking the night before, which had triggered the alarms. She stated that she had asked Timothy to remove the batteries from the devices to clear the smoke from the house. Regarding the candle found on the floor, she explained that she had lit it and placed it there to mask an unpleasant odor left by the family dog. Barbara then insistently requested to see Timothy's body inside the ambulance, using her professional experience as a nurse to reassure officers that she was accustomed to seeing medical trauma. After being allowed a brief moment alone, him, she emerged with the same stoic, controlled expression. However, when investigators informed her that a mandatory autopsy would be performed to determine the exact cause of death, Barbara reacted with unexpected anger, demanding to know why she had no say in the matter. Despite her objections, the medical examiner proceeded with the autopsy, which yielded a critical and undeniable piece of forensic evidence. The examination of Timothy's lungs revealed that there was absolutely no soot or smoke inhalation present. This finding was a monumental breakthrough for the investigation. In any standard house fire, a living person will naturally inhale smoke, leaving soot deposits in their airway and lungs. The complete absence of smoke inhalation meant that Timothy had stopped breathing and was already deceased before the fire was ever ignited. This forensic truth completely dismantled Barbara's alibi. Timothy could not have been asleep and snoring when she claimed to have left the house, as he was already dead. The investigation was officially reclassified as a homicide. With the autopsy proving that Timothy was deceased before the fire, investigators focused heavily on identifying the cause of his sudden incapacitation and the motive behind the crime. They quickly uncovered a family in the midst of a profound crisis. The evening before the fire, Timothy had gone on a walk with his son and explicitly shared that he was planning to seek a divorce in the very near future. The son recounted to investigators that the parental relationship had degenerated significantly, with intense arguments occurring with increasing frequency. He expressed a sincere belief that his mother was involved in his father's death. Further investigation into the couple's financial status revealed that they were drowning in severe debt. Despite the affluent image Barbara projected on social media, the family was living paycheck to paycheck. Credit card bills were past due, and the home was on the verge of foreclosure. Investigators also discovered that, approximately 5 months prior to the incident, Barbara had quietly increased Timothy S. life insurance policy from $50,000 to $200,000 and had also increased the homeowner S insurance policy on their residence. To Barbara, Timothy was worth vastly more deceased than alive. A sudden, seemingly accidental house fire would not only eliminate her marital problems and prevent the public embarrassment of a divorce, but it would also provide a massive financial payout to resolve her debts and maintain her lifestyle. To understand why such tragic cases occur with some frequency in modern society, it is necessary to examine the psychological and cultural pressures that drive individuals to such extreme measures. In many communities, there is an immense, often self-imposed pressure to project an image of perfect family life and material success. Social media has amplified this phenomenon, creating environments where individuals feel compelled to constantly showcase an artificial standard of living. When a person's identity becomes entirely dependent on this public facade, the threat of financial ruin or a public divorce can trigger a profound narcissistic crisis. Rather than facing reality and seeking help, some individuals experience a complete breakdown of moral boundaries, convincing themselves that committing a heinous crime is a viable method to preserve their social standing and financial security. This case serves as a powerful warning of the dangers of prioritizing social vanity over truth, communication, and emotional health. The challenge for investigators was converting their mounting circumstantial evidence into definitive proof of murder. Since the autopsy had ruled out physical trauma such as gunshot wounds or stab wounds, and there was no evidence of a natural medical event like a heart attack, the police strongly suspected poisoning. Knowing that Barbara was a diabetic, they initially investigated whether Timothy had been administered a lethal dose of insulin. However, the initial toxicology screens returned negative for insulin. Refusing to accept defeat, investigators consulted with medical experts and focused on Barbara's professional access to pharmaceuticals. As a surgical nurse, she had direct access to highly specialized medical compounds used in surgical anesthesia. This realization prompted the laboratory to run a specialized, highly targeted toxicology test for a fast-acting anesthetic called propofol. This drug is used exclusively in clinical settings to induce sedation and anesthesia, and it can cause rapid respiratory arrest and death if administered in improper amounts outside of a controlled medical environment. The specialized toxicology test returned positive, revealing a concentration of 0.18 micrograms per milliliter of propofol in Timothy's blood. Timothy, who had no medical reasons for sedation and no history of drug abuse, could have only received this specialized drug through deliberate administration. Investigators learned from hospital officials that, while propofol is strictly controlled, unused portions of vials are frequently discarded in designated disposal bins after a single use. As a surgical nurse responsible for disposing of medical materials, Barbara could easily pocket these discarded vials without raising suspicion, providing her with the perfect, virtually undetectable weapon. With the forensic evidence established, the police systematically dismantled Barbara S.'s timeline of the morning of the fire. They interviewed a coworker of Barbara, Megan DeCina, who had been driving to work on the morning of May 5, 2018. Megan recalled seeing Barbara S.'s vehicle, which possessed highly recognizable personalized license plates, parked in the driveway of the Pasa residence at 7:22 in the morning. Megan was able to verify this exact time using a location tracking application on her mobile telephone. meant Barbara was still at the home just 11 minutes before the 911 call was placed reporting smoke. Furthermore, financial records and security video from a local automated teller machine proved that Barbara withdrew $200 at 7:25 in the morning, placing her in town immediately after leaving the house. The timeline proved that the fire, which had been burning rapidly on top of the bed, must have been set immediately before Barbara left the residence, completely destroying her claim that she had departed before 7 in the morning while her husband was sleeping. Equipped with this compelling evidence, investigators invited Barbara to the police station for a formal interview. While she was cooperative when discussing general financial difficulties, she became completely uncommunicative when investigators pressed her about the specific timeline of the morning of the fire and the scientific realities of the impending toxicology reports. Realizing she was caught, Barbara terminated the interview, stating she wished to speak with her children. Before she left, officers executed search warrants on her vehicle and cell phone. The following morning, in a desperate attempt to evade justice, Barbara took an overdose of prescription medications at her mother's home, resulting in emergency medical personnel being called to treat her for seizure-like symptoms. She was transported to a hospital in Des Moines, where she remained under close medical observation for 10 days. For the community, this desperate act was widely interpreted not as a sign of grief, but as a clear admission of guilt. Upon her release from the hospital on May 18, 2018, Barbara Pasa was immediately arrested and charged with first-degree murder and first-degree arson. Her trial commenced on September 17, 2019. The prosecution presented a meticulous case, weaving together the forensic findings of the autopsy, the presence of propofol, the disabled smoke detectors, the financial motive, and the digital evidence that shattered her alibi. The defense attempted to suggest that a neighbor who also worked in the medical field could have entered the home and administered the drug, but investigators quickly disproved this theory by showing that the neighbor had left town for a medical conference at 5:30 in the morning on the day of the crime. Barbara took the stand in her own defense, attempting to sway the jury with emotional testimony about past personal tragedies, but her tears were perceived by the jury and observers as manipulative and insincere. After a trial lasting several days, the jury deliberated for a mere 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on both charges. Barbara Pasa was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 20 years for the arson. Reflecting on this tragic case offers valuable insights for Bayou Tehat communities and law enforcement on how to prevent such tragedies and resolve complex investigations more rapidly. For communities, the primary lesson is the critical importance of fostering environments where families can discuss financial and marital distress openly, without fear of social judgment. Had there been greater transparency and less emphasis on maintaining a perfect material facade, the immense pressure that culminated in this crime might have been mitigated through counseling, financial restructuring, or a civilized separation. For law enforcement, the rapid resolution of this case highlights the immense value of multidisciplinary collaboration and modern digital forensics. The coordination between the local fire department, the state fire marshal, and the medical examiner was exemplary. By recognizing the red flags of the disabled smoke detectors and the candle immediately, first responders preserved crucial evidence. Furthermore, the quick deployment of digital forensic tools such as analyzing the coworker S mobile phone application data and securing the automated teller machine security footage, allowed investigators to establish an absolute, undeniable timeline that exposed the suspect S falsehoods. In future investigations, the early identification of a suspect's professional access to unique materials combined with targeted toxicological testing can significantly accelerate the process of securing justice. Ultimately, while this case brought profound sadness to a close-knit community, it also demonstrated the triumph of meticulous science and dedicated police work, ensuring that the memory of Timothy Pasa is honored and that justice is fully served. On a remarkably quiet Saturday morning in the year 2018, the small community of Centerville, Iowa, was beginning its weekend in a routine, peaceful fashion. In close-knit towns where generations of families grow up together, attend the same schools, and gather at the same local events, a sense of security and mutual trust defines daily life. Neighbors know each other by name, children play in the same parks, and any disruption to this peaceful atmosphere is noticed immediately. On this particular morning, which was the 5th of May, a local resident was driving near South Park when he noticed an unusual sight. Plumes of heavy dark smoke were escaping from a residence located at MOF 828 South Park Avenue. Recognizing that this was the home of Timothy and Barbara Pasa, a family well known in the community, the concerned driver stopped his vehicle to see if anyone needed assistance. With the smoke thickening rapidly, he made the crucial decision to call the emergency services by dialing 911. When the local fire department and first responders arrived at the scene, they were met with a challenging environment. As soon as they breached the entrance of the home, a family dog rushed out of the door to escape the hazardous conditions. Inside, heavy black smoke hung from the ceiling to the floor, severely limiting visibility and creating a highly dangerous atmosphere. Firefighters advanced down the hallway toward the master bedroom, which was situated on the southeast corner of the house, where they identified the primary source of the blaze. Fortunately, the fire was contained and extinguished before it could engulf the entire wooden structure. However, as the dense smoke began to clear, the response team made a somber and disturbing discovery. Resting on the bed were the severely burned remains of a middle-aged man. Because of the close relationships within the town, the first responders quickly recognized that the deceased individual was 50-year-old Timothy Dale Pasa, known affectionately to everyone as Tim. The discovery of a deceased individual immediately transformed the nature of the emergency response. What began as a standard fire suppression operation quickly shifted into a potential crime scene investigation. To ensure no other family members were trapped in the residence, a secondary search team meticulously checked every room, looking under beds, inside closets, and throughout the basement. The local authorities were particularly concerned about the whereabouts of Tim's wife, Barbara, and their 2 teenage children. Fortunately, the children were soon accounted for, as they had left earlier that morning on a school bus to attend a regional youth soccer tournament. Barbara, however, was not at the scene, and initial attempts to reach her by telephone were unsuccessful. Timothy Dale Pasa was a deeply respected member of the Centerville community. Born and raised in the area, he was the youngest of several siblings and had built a life centered around his family and his passions. In his youth, Tim had discovered a profound love for music, particularly country music, and became an exceptionally talented guitar player. He would often spend hours practicing and playing in local garages with his high school friends, eventually becoming the lead guitarist for a popular regional country band. Music served as his creative outlet, a way to connect with others and share his vibrant spirit. Throughout his life, Tim worked diligently to provide for his family, spending years employed at a local business named Lockridge before training as an emergency medical technician. Later, he transitioned into a role as a customer representative for the utility company Alliant Energy. To his friends and neighbors, Tim was a devoted father who never missed a sporting event, a music recital, or a school activity involving his children. His pride in his son and daughter was evident to anyone who spoke with him. In the year 1999, at one of his musical performances, Tim met a 25-year-old local nurse named Barbara Glasscock. Known for her witty and outgoing personality, Barbara was drawn to Tim's calm and steady demeanor, describing him as the perfect balance to her more energetic nature. The two fell in love, became engaged within a few months, and were married in the year 2000. Over the next 18 years, they built what appeared to be an enviable life. They raised 2 children, participated actively in community events, and eventually purchased and remodeled a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood. Barbara worked as a dedicated surgical unit nurse at Mercy One Medical Center, where she was widely regarded as a caring and professional healthcare provider. On social media platforms, she frequently shared photographs of her beautifully decorated home and her active family, presenting an image of domestic perfection. However, behind the polished facade of the beautiful house and the cheerful online updates, the Pasa family was experiencing a profound crisis. As investigators began to process the scene of the fire, several highly unusual details caught their attention, raising immediate questions about the true cause of the blaze. Arson investigators and police officers noticed that the smoke alarm inside the master bedroom was lying on the floor, completely undamaged by the heat or flames. More importantly, the battery had been removed from the compartment, rendering the device entirely inactive. When investigators searched the opposite side of the home, they discovered another smoke alarm near the children's bedrooms that had also been disabled by opening the battery door. Additionally, on the floor of the master bedroom, on the side opposite where Tim's body was discovered, lay a candle that had been placed in a highly suspicious position. In a typical accidental fire, occupants are awoken by the heat, the smoke, or the sound of an alarm, resulting in instinctive physical movement to escape the danger. In this case, there was no indication that Tim had made any attempt to move from his position on the bed. He lay entirely still, as if he had been completely oblivious to the roaring fire that had developed right beside him. This lack of movement, combined with the deliberately disabled safety systems, prompted the authorities to approach the tragedy with a high degree of skepticism. When Barbara finally arrived at the scene, having been contacted through her daughter who was on the school bus, her reaction puzzled some of the first responders. While individuals experience grief and shock in highly diverse ways, Barbara's behavior was notably stoic and devoid of visible emotion. She explained to the officers that she had spent the previous evening baking snacks for her children's soccer tournament until midnight. She claimed, "She woke up at 5:30 in the morning to prepare breakfast, woke her children at 6 in the morning, and watched them depart for the school bus." According to her initial statement, she left the house between 6:50 and 7 in the morning to drive to the soccer game, leaving Tim asleep and snoring in bed. When questioned about the disabled smoke detectors, Barbara offered an explanation that initially sounded plausible. She claimed that her late-night baking had set off the alarms, prompting her to ask Tim to disable them until the air cleared. Regarding the candle found on the bedroom floor, she stated that she had lit it to mask an unpleasant odor caused by the family dog. She then requested to see her husband's body. Despite warnings from the assistant fire chief regarding the severe burns Tim had sustained, Barbara insisted that her extensive experience as a nurse prepared her for the sight, demanding a private moment with him in the ambulance. Upon exiting, she remained remarkably composed. A critical turning point in the investigation occurred when the medical examiner conducted a mandatory autopsy. While Barbara expressed intense frustration and anger when informed that an autopsy would be performed, she had no legal authority to prevent it. Forensic pathologists seek clear indicators of the cause of death, and in cases involving fire, they look closely for evidence of smoke inhalation, such as soot in the airway, and elevated levels of carbon monoxide in the blood. When the results of Tim S. autopsy were returned, they revealed a shocking truth. There was absolutely no smoke inhalation or carbon monoxide present in his lungs. From a scientific standpoint, this finding was definitive. Tim was already deceased before the fire was ignited. Her claim that he was snoring peacefully in bed when she departed the home at 7 a.m. was medically impossible. With the cause of death officially deemed a homicide, the police department began to investigate Barbara as the primary person of interest. Investigators considered the possibility of chemical incapacitation, noting that Barbara was diabetic, which explained the abundance of insulin and syringes throughout the residence. However, toxicology screens showed no abnormal insulin levels. Shortly thereafter, a family member contacted the police, explaining that Tim and Barbara S.'s teenage son wanted to speak with investigators. During a sensitive interview at the law center, the son revealed that his parents' marriage had been in a state of severe decline, with frequent and escalating arguments. Crucially, the son shared that on the evening before the tragedy, he and his father had gone for a walk, during which Tim expressed his definitive plan to seek a divorce in the very near future. To understand the deeper motives behind this tragic event, detectives reached out to friends and colleagues of the couple. A close friend of Barbara, Sonia Carson, provided vital information regarding the reality of the Pasa marriage. Sonia described the couple as lacking mutual affection for many years, suggesting they remained together primarily for the sake of their children. Barbara was deeply concerned about social perception and feared that a divorce would damage her standing in the community and isolate her from her social circle. More disturbingly, Sonia recalled a dinner conversation that occurred approximately 2 weeks prior to the fire. During that gathering, Barbara became highly emotional, expressing intense anger toward Tim, lamenting their financial difficulties, and worrying that her children would choose to live with their father in the event of a separation. In a loud voice, Barbara had stated that she hated her husband and remarked that if she ever wanted to get rid of someone, she possessed the knowledge and ability to do so. At the time, Sonia had dismissed the comment as mere venting, but in light of the tragedy, the statement took on a chilling significance. A thorough review of the family's financial records revealed a hidden reality that contrasted sharply with Barbara's social media posts. The beautiful home was on the verge of foreclosure. Credit card accounts were severely past due, and the couple had recently been forced to refinance their mortgage to manage mounting debts. Barbara was known to spend money excessively on clothing, home decor, and gifts, driving the family deeper into financial ruin. Amidst this pressure, investigators discovered that approximately 5 months prior to the incident, Tim's life insurance coverage had been increased from $50,000 to $200,000. The homeowner's insurance policy had also been adjusted to provide higher coverage. It became increasingly clear to investigators that Barbara faced a choice between a humiliating public divorce and foreclosure, or a substantial financial payout that would preserve her lifestyle and her social image. During a formal interview at the police station, investigators sought to establish a clear timeline and gauge Barbara's reactions. While she was willing to discuss the family's financial struggles, admitting they lived paycheck to paycheck, she became extremely evasive when pressed about the specific events of that Saturday morning. When detectives pointed out that modern forensic science would inevitably uncover the truth and urged her to explain what had led to her decisions, Barbara chose to terminate the interview, stating she wished to speak with her children. Before she could leave, officers executed search warrants on her vehicle and seized her mobile phone. The following morning, before the investigation could proceed further, emergency medical services received a distress call from Barbara's mother's residence. Responding officers found Barbara suffering from an apparent intentional ingestion of harmful substances, requiring immediate transport to a hospital in Des Moines. She was placed under medical observation for approximately 10 days. In a small community like Centerville, news of the hospitalization spread rapidly, and while some initially wondered if her actions were driven by overwhelming grief, the consensus among residents increasingly aligned with the findings of the police. While Barbara was recovering, investigators focused on obtaining the definitive physical evidence required to secure a conviction. Given Barbara's professional background as a surgical nurse, detectives suspected she may have utilized a medical substance to incapacitate her husband. They requested specialized toxicological testing of Tim's blood, specifically looking for anesthetics. The laboratory returned a positive result for propofol, a potent, fast-acting sedative used in clinical environments to induce and maintain anesthesia. The toxicology report identified a concentration of 0.18 milliliters in his system. Tim had no medical reason to access such a drug, nor did he have any history of substance abuse. Investigators contacted representatives at the medical center where Barbara worked. They learned that when propofol is administered during surgical procedures, any remaining portion within a single-use vial must be discarded. Because Barbara was responsible for clearing surgical areas and disposing of waste containers, she had direct, unmonitored access to these discarded vials. It would have been remarkably simple for her to pocket a small amount of the substance without raising suspicion among her colleagues. Detectives also dismantled Barbara's established timeline using digital and physical evidence. Although she claimed to have left the house before 7 in the morning, a co-worker named Megan DeZena reported seeing Barbara's distinct vehicle, bearing a personalized license plate with the family name, parked in the driveway at 7:22 that morning. Megan's location was verified by a mobile application used for her work, which tracked her route past the Pasa home. Furthermore, automated teller machine records showed that Barbara withdrew $200 from a local bank terminal at 7:25 in the morning, with surveillance footage confirming her identity and vehicle. This established a narrow, critical window. The fire was reported by the passing neighbor at approximately 7:33 in the morning, meaning the fire had been set immediately before Barbara left the area. Based on this comprehensive body of evidence, the prosecution constructed a clear narrative. Sometime during the early morning hours, Barbara utilized her medical training to administer a lethal dose of propofol to her sleeping husband, rendering him entirely incapable of defending himself or escaping. She then gathered flammable items, such as clothing or bedding, stacked them around him, and set them alight to destroy the physical evidence of her crime. She disabled the smoke alarms to prevent early detection by neighbors, hoping the house would be entirely consumed before anyone noticed, which would mask the presence of the drug in his system. Fortunately, her lack of understanding regarding basic forensic science and fire dynamics caused her plan to fail. Her attempt to blame a neighbor who was also a nurse was quickly disproven when investigators confirmed the neighbor had left for a conference in Des Moines at 5:30 that morning. In September of the year 2019, Barbara Pasa stood trial for first-degree murder and first-degree arson. Despite her emotional testimony on the stand, during which she cried and maintained her innocence, the jury deliberated for a mere 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on both charges. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 25 years for the arson charge. This tragic case offers profound insights into human psychology, the dangers of prioritizing public perception over personal reality, and the critical importance of early intervention in domestic crises. The primary motive in this case was a destructive combination of financial desperation, pride, and an extreme desire to maintain a picture-perfect lifestyle. Barbara was willing to commit an irreversible act of violence rather than face the perceived social humiliation of a divorce and financial foreclosure. In modern society, the pressure to project an image of wealth, happiness, and perfection on social media platforms can create a dangerous psychological disconnect, driving individuals to extreme measures to conceal their personal struggles. For communities and families, the key lesson is the importance of fostering environments where individuals feel safe, discussing relationship difficulties and financial hardships without fear of judgment. Had there been greater transparency and a willingness to seek professional counseling or financial mediation, the tragic outcome might have been avoided. Neighbors, friends, and family members should also remain vigilant to subtle warning signs of domestic distress, such as sudden, dramatic increases in insurance policies, intense public outbursts of anger, or severe discrepancies between a family's visible spending habits and their actual financial stability. From a law enforcement perspective, this case highlights several highly effective strategies for solving complex domestic crimes rapidly. First, investigators must never accept initial appearances at face value, especially in cases involving household fires with fatalities. The decision by first responders to immediately treat the scene as a potential crime scene due to the disabled smoke alarms and the unusual position of the candle was instrumental in preserving vital evidence. Second, the close cooperation between arson investigators, forensic pathologists, and local detectives allowed for a swift pivot from an accidental fire theory to a homicide investigation. The immediate request for an autopsy and the subsequent specialized toxicology testing for medical-grade anesthetics were the decisive factors in uncovering the truth. Finally, the meticulous gathering of digital footprints, such as mobile application location data, automated teller machine records, and surveillance footage, successfully dismantled the perpetrator's alibi. demonstrating that modern technology remains one of the most powerful tools in the pursuit of justice. The quiet avenues of Centerville, Iowa, are typically characterized by a predictable, comforting routine. In a close-knit community where neighbors know one another and generational roots run deep, safety is often taken for granted. This sense of security, however, makes the sudden appearance of a crisis all the more shocking. On the morning of May 5th in the year 2018, the peaceful ambiance of this small town was shattered by an event that would ultimately expose a complex web of domestic trouble, financial distress, and a deeply tragic criminal act. The weekend began like many others, with families preparing for sporting events and local gatherings. A resident driving near South Park noticed a highly unusual sight. Thick, dark smoke was billowing from a residential home in the neighborhood. Recognizing the immediate danger, the passerby stopped to assess the situation, hoping to render assistance to anyone who might be trapped inside. Observing no immediate movement but seeing the smoke intensify, the citizen promptly contacted emergency services by dialing 911. In a small town, emergency responders often know the residents personally. As the fire department arrived on the scene, they quickly recognized the property as the home of Timothy Dale Pasa and his family. The firefighters entered the structure, immediately encountering heavy, black smoke that filled the house from floor to ceiling. The intense heat and zero visibility made the entry hazardous, but the team advanced down the hallway toward the southeast corner of the residence, where the fire appeared to be centered. The flames were successfully contained to the master bedroom and extinguished before they could consume the rest of the house. However, as the smoke began to clear, the responders made a grim discovery on the bed. They found the remains of a 50-year-old man, subsequently identified as Timothy Dale Pasa. While the damage to his body was extensive, the immediate priority shifted to searching the remainder of the residence to ensure that no other family members, particularly the couple's 2 children, were still inside. Teams systematically checked every room, under beds, and throughout the basement. Fortunately, the search confirmed that the children were not present. Timothy's wife, Barbara, was also nowhere to be found. The news of the tragedy spread quickly through the community. Timothy, known to his friends as Tim, was a beloved figure in Centerville. Born and raised in the town, he had graduated from the local high school and was widely appreciated for his musical talents. He was a talented country band guitar player, an outlet that allowed him to connect with many residents over the years. In addition to his music, Tim had dedicated part of his life to public service as an emergency medical technician and had later worked as a customer representative for Alliant Energy. His friends remembered him as a calm, steady presence, a devoted father who actively supported his children at every athletic event and school activity. His path had crossed with Barbara Glasscock in the year 1999 when she was 25 years old. Barbara, also a local high school graduate, worked as a professional surgical nurse. The two had fallen in love, married after a brief engagement, and established a life together. To outward appearances, they were a successful, hard-working couple. They had purchased and remodeled a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood. Barbara often shared pictures of their home and family activities on social media, projecting an image of stability, happiness, and success. Yet, the scene of the fire began to present investigators with several highly unusual details that did not align with a typical accidental fire. As fire investigators and police officers examined the master bedroom, they noticed several anomalies. On the floor, On the opposite side of the bed from where the victim was located sat a candle. The candle was entirely unburnt and undamaged, despite being in the same room as a fire hot enough to cause severe thermal damage. Even more concerning was the state of the smoke alarms. The smoke alarm in the master bedroom was lying on the floor, its battery compartment open and the battery removed. The device itself showed no signs of melting or heat damage, indicating it had been dismantled before the fire began. A second smoke alarm, located in the hallway between the children's bedrooms, was also found deactivated, with its battery compartment open. These findings raised immediate red flags for the investigators. In a standard house fire, active smoke alarms are expected to alert occupants, and even if they fail, they are typically found mounted and damaged by heat. The deliberate deactivation of multiple alarms strongly suggested intentional preparation. When Barbara arrived at the scene later that morning, she appeared calm and stoic. She explained to the officers that she had been traveling to her children's soccer tournament and had not had reliable cellular service, which was why she did not answer initial phone calls. Upon learning of her husband's passing, she showed little outward emotion, a reaction that some observers initially attributed to profound shock. In her initial conversation with the police, Barbara provided a detailed timeline of her activities. She claimed she had stayed up late the previous evening, until approximately midnight, preparing snacks and baking cookies for the soccer tournament. She stated, she woke up at approximately 5:30 in the morning, made breakfast for her children, and left the residence with them between 6:50 and 7 in the morning. According to her account, Tim was asleep and snoring when she departed. When questioned about the deactivated smoke detectors, Barbara explained that she was responsible. She claimed that while she was baking cookies the night before, she had accidentally burned something, which triggered the alarms. To quiet the noise, she said she had asked Tim to remove the batteries. Regarding the candle found on the floor, she explained that she had lit it to mask an odor because their dog had urinated on the carpet, though she could not recall exactly where she had placed it. Despite her professional background as a nurse, Barbara insisted on viewing her husband's remains in the ambulance before they were transported. The investigators permitted this brief moment, noting her continued stoic demeanor. However, when informed that a routine autopsy would be conducted, Barbara reacted with unexpected anger, protesting the procedure. Since the death did not occur under medical supervision, the autopsy was legally required, and investigators proceeded despite her objections. The investigation took a dramatic turn when the preliminary autopsy results were delivered. The medical examiner revealed that there was zero evidence of smoke inhalation or carbon monoxide in Tim's lungs. In any active house fire, a living person will inevitably inhale soot and carbon monoxide as they breathe. The complete absence of these substances proved scientifically that Tim was already deceased before the fire was ignited. Barbara's claimed that her husband was snoring when she left the house at approximately 7 in the morning was physically impossible. With the cause of death now highly suspicious, the inquiry officially transitioned into a homicide investigation. Investigators began to look closely at the dynamics of the marriage and the family's financial situation. The original picture of a perfect household began to dissolve. A relative contacted the police, explaining that Tim and Barbara's son wished to speak with them. During an interview at the law center, the son revealed that the family dynamics had been severely strained for a long time with frequent arguments. The son shared a critical piece of information. The evening before the fire, he and his father had gone for a walk, during which Tim confided that he was planning to seek a divorce in the near future. This revelation provided a strong potential motive. Further interviews with close friends, including a longtime associate named Sonia Carson, painted a picture of a marriage that had deteriorated significantly. Sonia recalled a gathering approximately 2 weeks prior to the tragedy, where Barbara had openly and loudly expressed her frustration. Vikapaite hat Tim, complaining about their finances and the prospect of a divorce. During that conversation, Barbara had reportedly stated that she did not want her social standing to be affected by a divorce and expressed concern over whether the children would choose to live with her. In a moment of intense frustration, she had remarked that if she wanted to get rid of someone, she knew how to do so. At the time, her friends dismissed the comment as mere venting, but in light of the tragedy, the statement took on a far more sinister meaning. Financial investigations quickly uncovered substantial evidence of distress. Despite the upscale home and the outward appearance of wealth, the family was living under immense pressure. Investigators found documents indicating that the home was on fire risk of foreclosure. Credit card bills were severely past due, and the family had been forced to refinance their mortgage. Furthermore, records revealed that approximately 5 months prior to the incident, Barbara had increased Tim's life insurance policy from $50,000 to $200,000. She had also increased the property insurance on their home. These financial discoveries suggested that Barbara stood to benefit significantly from her husband's death and the destruction of their home. To gather more direct evidence, investigators invited Barbara to the law center for a formal interview. While she was cooperative when discussing their general financial difficulties, confirming they lived paycheck to paycheck, her demeanor changed dramatically when the investigators pressed her for details regarding the morning of the fire. Faced with questions about the scientific impossibility of her timeline and the likelihood of upcoming toxicology results, Barbara clammed up and refused to answer further, requesting to end the interview so she could speak with her children. Before she left the facility, officers executed search warrants on her vehicle and her mobile phone. The following morning, emergency services received a 911 call from Barbara S. mother's home, reporting that Barbara was experiencing a severe medical crisis due to an apparent ingestion of an excess of medication. She was transported to a hospital in Des Moines, where she remained under medical observation for approximately 10 days. While Barbara was recovering, investigators focused on obtaining concrete forensic proof of how Tim had been incapacitated. Given Barbara's occupation as a surgical nurse, investigators requested that the toxicology laboratory conduct specialized testing for medical sedatives and anesthetics. This targeted analysis led to the discovery of propofol in Tim's blood, measured at 0.18 milliliters. Propofol is a powerful, fast-acting anesthetic utilized in clinical settings to induce anesthesia and sedation. In improper dosages and without respiratory support, it can rapidly cause respiratory arrest and death. Tim had no medical reason to possess or use this substance, and he had no access to it. As a surgical nurse, however, Barbara had direct access to the hospital's medication supply and waste management systems. Investigators learned that partially used vials of propofol were routinely discarded, allowing an individual in her position to easily obtain the substance without detection. With the chemical agent identified, investigators reconstructed the timeline of the morning of the fire. Barbara S. claim of having left the home before 7 in the morning was directly contradicted by digital evidence. A co-worker, Megan Decina, had driven past the Pasa home on her way to work that morning. Megan utilized a mobile application for her job that logged her precise geographic location. The application records showed she passed the home at 7:22 in the morning, and she observed Barbara S.'s vehicle still parked in the driveway. Furthermore, bank records and surveillance footage showed Barbara withdrawing $200 from an automated teller machine in Centerville at 7:25 in the morning. With the 911 call reporting smoke at 7:33 in the morning, the window of time for the fire to have been set was extremely narrow, pointing directly to Barbara's presence at the home immediately before the smoke became visible. The physical evidence, the scientific findings of the autopsy, the presence of the anesthetic, the financial motives, and the disproved timeline provided the district attorney with a compelling case. The theory of the prosecution was that Barbara had administered a fatal dose of propofol to Tim while he slept, and then attempted to destroy the evidence of her action by setting fire to the bed. Expecting the fire to consume the house and cover up the chemical intervention. Upon her release from the hospital on May 18, 2018, Barbara was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and first-degree arson. She pleaded not guilty, and her trial commenced on September 17, 2019. The defense argued that the investigation had focused on the wrong suspect, suggesting that a neighbor who also worked in the medical field could have entered the home and committed the crime. However, investigators had already thoroughly vetted this neighbor, confirming he had a solid alibi and had left town for a conference early that morning. Barbara chose to testify in her own defense, presenting an emotional narrative and attempting to garner sympathy by discussing past personal tragedies. The prosecution countered by presenting the overwhelming sequence of objective, scientific, and digital evidence. After a trial lasting several days, the jury deliberated for approximately 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on both charges. Barbara was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 20 years for the arson conviction. This tragic case offers several profound insights into human behavior and the critical role of scientific investigation. The motive behind the crime was deeply rooted in the destructive pressure of maintaining an artificial social image. The pursuit of perceived perfection, fueled by financial overextension and comparison, can lead to extreme psychological strain. When individuals prioritize appearance over truth and honest communication, the resulting desperation can manifest in devastating choices. The successful resolution of this case highlights the meticulous efforts of the law enforcement and forensic teams. By refusing to accept initial appearances and carefully analyzing minor discrepancies, such as the position of the unburnt candle and the dismantled smoke alarms, investigators were able to uncover a hidden crime. The application of precise forensic science, particularly the testing for specific medical compounds, and the analysis of lung tissue for smoke inhalation, remains one of the most reliable tools for establishing the truth in complex investigations. For the community, this narrative serves as a reminder of the value of mutual support and open dialogue. Recognizing when families are experiencing severe distress and offering non-judgmental avenues for assistance can help prevent situations from escalating into crises. In the end, the true tragedy of the event lies in the profound loss experienced by the children and the community, who lost a dedicated father, friend, and talented individual. Honoring Timothy's memory means remembering his kindness, his passion for music, and his devotion to his family, while continuing to uphold the values of justice and truth. In the heart of the great American Midwest, there exists a quiet expectation of safety, a collective belief that the trials of the wider world will not easily penetrate the peaceful boundaries of small-town life. Centerville, Iowa, is precisely the kind of community where such assumptions are woven into the very fabric of daily existence. It is a place where neighbors recognize one another as vehicles, where children grow up playing on the same tree-lined streets, and where a shared history binds the residents together in a close-knit web of mutual support. In communities of this nature, the home is regarded as a sanctuary, and the family is viewed as the absolute cornerstone of social stability. Yet, beneath the serene surface of manicured lawns and friendly waves, there sometimes lurks a precarious pressure to maintain an illusion of flawless prosperity. The modern desire to curate a picture-perfect existence, to project an image of material abundance and domestic bliss to the public, can sometimes become a heavy and destructive burden. When the reality of financial hardship and marital discord begins to fracture this carefully constructed facade, the psychological toll on an individual who is obsessed with appearance can lead to devastating choices. The tragic case of Timothy Dale Pasa stands as a profound and sobering reminder of how far someone may go to preserve a false image of perfection, and how the diligent, methodical work of local law enforcement can dismantle even the most calculated attempts to evade justice. Timothy Dale Pasa was a man deeply rooted in the soil of Centerville. Born and raised in this quiet Iowa town, he was known by almost everyone as an all-around good guy, a gentle soul who found his greatest joy in his family and his music. From his youth at the local high school, Timothy possessed a rare talent for the guitar, a skill that allowed him to express the quiet emotions he did not often speak aloud. He became the lead guitar player in a popular country band, a role that brought him into contact with many residents who admired both his musical ability and his calm, unassuming demeanor. It was at one of his performances in the year 1999 that he met Barbara Glasscock, a young local nurse whose outgoing personality seemed to complement his quiet nature. They fell in love, married, and began building a life together, eventually welcoming 2 children into their home. Timothy was a remarkably present father, a constant figure at the sports fields and school events, always beaming with pride when discussing the achievements of his son and daughter. He worked tirelessly to provide for his family, serving first as an emergency medical technician and later as a customer representative for Alliant Energy. His wife, Barbara, worked as a nurse in the surgical department of the local hospital, earning a reputation as a caring professional. To the outside world, the family seemed to represent the American dream, a perception reinforced by the upscale home they purchased and remodeled, and the frequent, cheerful updates shared on social media. This illusion of domestic peace was shattered on a quiet Saturday morning, specifically on the 5th of May in the year 2018. As the sun rose over Centerville, a local resident driving past the residential area near South Park noticed an unsettling sight. Plumes of thick, dark smoke were beginning to escape from the home belonging to the Pasa family. Recognizing the potential danger and knowing the family well, the passerby immediately stopped to render assistance and placed a call to the emergency services by dialing 911. Within minutes, the local fire department and police officers arrived at the scene. Upon opening the door, the first responders were met vekep ite hot heavy black smoke that filled the house from floor to ceiling, making visibility nearly impossible. Firefighters pushed through the darkness, advancing down the hallway toward the master bedroom on the southeast corner of the residence, which appeared to be the source of the blaze. The fire was quickly extinguished before it could engulf the entire structure. But as the smoke began to clear, the response team made a horrific discovery. On the bed lay the badly burned remains of a human being. The damage to the body was severe, but those on the scene soon recognized the victim as 50-year-old Timothy Dale Pasa. With the discovery of a deceased individual inside the home, the nature of the emergency instantly transformed into a serious investigation. While police and fire officials secured the scene, search teams moved throughout the house to ensure no other family members were trapped inside. Timothy's wife, Barbara, was not in the residence, and their 2 children were also unaccounted for at that moment. Contact was eventually established with the children, who were safe, but Barbara was initially unreachable, as she was reportedly traveling to an out-of-town soccer tournament. When she finally arrived back at the scene and was informed of her husband's passing, observers noted that her reaction was strangely stoic, showing very little visible emotion. Although many onlookers attributed this behavior to the profound shock of the situation, the experienced investigators on the scene began to take note of several physical anomalies within the master bedroom. A decorative candle was found sitting on the floor on the opposite side of the bed from where Timothy's body lay. More concerning was the state of the home safety devices. The smoke detector inside the master bedroom had been removed from the ceiling and was lying on the floor, its battery completely removed from the compartment. Yet the unit itself showed no signs of heat damage or melting. Furthermore, another smoke detector located in the hallway between the children's bedrooms was also found disabled, with its battery compartment left wide open. When questioned about these unusual findings, Barbara offered explanations that initially seemed plausible to the officers. She claimed that she had been baking cookies and preparing snacks late into the night for the soccer tournament, and because something had burned in the kitchen, she had asked Timothy to disable the smoke detectors to clear the smoke. She also asserted that she had lit the candle and placed it near the bedroom to mask the odor of dog urine on the carpet. She maintained that when she left the house between 6:50 and 7 in the morning, Timothy was asleep in bed and snoring peacefully. However, when informed that a mandatory autopsy would be conducted to determine the exact cause of death, Barbara became uncharacteristically upset and protested the procedure, a reaction that raised red flags for the investigators. The autopsy was carried out despite her objections, and the results provided the pivotal turning point in the case. The medical examiner discovered that there was no soot, carbon monoxide, or smoke inhalation present in Timothy's lungs. This critical forensic detail meant that Timothy had stopped breathing before the fire ever started. He was already deceased when the room was set ablaze, directly contradicting Barbara's statement that he was alive and snoring when she departed the home. The investigation immediately transitioned into a homicide inquiry. Detectives began searching for a motive and quickly uncovered a family in deep crisis. Despite the picture-perfect lifestyle projected on social media, financial records revealed that the family was living paycheck to paycheck, with credit card bills long past due and their upscale home on the verge of foreclosure. Investigators also discovered that approximately 5 months prior to the incident, Barbara had increased Timothy S. life insurance coverage from $50,000 to $200,000, and had also increased the homeowner S insurance policy. It became clear that Timothy was worth significantly more to his wife deceased than alive. This financial motive was further supported by a heartbreaking conversation with the couple's teenage son, who reached out to the police. He revealed that the evening before the tragedy, he and his father had gone for a walk, during which Timothy confessed that he was planning to seek a divorce in the near future and expressed deep concern that his wife might be trying to poison him. A close friend of Barbara, Sonia Carson, also came forward with critical information. She recalled a dinner gathering 2 weeks prior to the fire, where Barbara had become highly emotional and declared loudly that she hated her husband, was terrified of the financial implications of a divorce, and remarked that if she ever wanted to get rid of someone, she knew how to do it. These mounting pieces of circumstantial evidence pointed directly to Barbara, but the police still needed to determine the exact method used to incapacitate Timothy. Given Barbara's profession as a surgical nurse, investigators requested specialized toxicological testing of Timothy's blood, focusing on pharmaceutical agents used in medical settings. The laboratory returned a shocking finding: the presence of propofol, a fast-acting anesthetic drug typically used to sedate patients before surgery. Propofol is a tightly controlled substance that causes rapid unconsciousness and, in sufficient doses, can suppress breathing and cause death. As a surgical nurse, Barbara had direct access to the drug, routinely tasked with disposing of partially used vials, from which she could easily secrete the medication. The timeline provided by Barbara was further dismantled by modern technology. A co-worker of Barbara S. happened to drive past the residence on the morning of the fire and noticed Barbara S.'s vehicle, which featured distinctive personalized license plates, parked in the driveway at 7:22 in the morning. This sighting was verified by a mobile application on the co-worker's phone that tracked her location. Only 11 minutes later, at 7:33 in the morning, the emergency call reporting the fire was placed. Furthermore, banking records and surveillance footage showed Barbara withdrawing cash from a local automated teller machine at 7:25 that same morning. These details suggested that Barbara was at the home much later than she claimed, and that she likely started the fire immediately before leaving. Faced with the mounting evidence during a formal police interview, Barbara chose to terminate the questioning. Shortly afterward, she experienced a medical emergency related to an intentional ingestion of medication at her mother's home, but she recovered under medical supervision. Upon her release from the hospital, she was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and first-degree arson. During her trial in September of the year 2019, Barbara pleaded not guilty, and her defense team attempted to divert suspicion toward a neighbor who was also a nurse. However, investigators easily disproved this theory, establishing that the neighbor was out of town at a conference at the time of the fire. Barbara took the stand in her own defense, attempting to sway the jury with emotional testimony, but the community and the prosecution recognized her tears as a continuation of her performative nature. After a brief deliberation of approximately 3 hours, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on both counts. Barbara was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 25 years for the arson charge. This tragic case offers a profound lesson on the dangers of superficial vanity and the severe psychological consequences of prioritizing social status over human life. It highlights the incredible detail-oriented work of forensic investigators and the local police, whose refusal to accept a convenient explanation allowed them to secure justice for Timothy. The community of Centerville was left to heal from a tragedy that stripped 2 children of their father and exposed the dark reality behind a seemingly perfect household, proving that the truth will ultimately prevail over even the most calculated deception. Analyzing this case reveals a deep-seated psychological conflict that is unfortunately common in modern society. The primary motive behind this tragic crime stems from an intense, obsessive desire to maintain an outward appearance of domestic and financial perfection. In small, close-knit communities, the social pressure to conform to high standards of material success can sometimes overwhelm personal ethics. When individuals base their entire self-worth on social media portrayals, upscale neighborhoods, and luxury goods, any threat to that illusion becomes an existential crisis. A pending divorce is not just a personal transition. To a person consumed by vanity, it represents a public admission of failure. The financial reality of living paycheck to paycheck, coupled with impending foreclosure, creates a desperate state of mind. Instead of seeking help or accepting reality, the perpetrator sought a permanent, albeit highly destructive, escape that would simultaneously preserve her public image and provide a substantial financial windfall through increased life insurance and homeowner policies. The frequency of such tragic cases in contemporary society highlights the critical need for community awareness and psychological vigilance. Often, the transition from domestic dissatisfaction to criminal behavior is paved with unaddressed mental health struggles, severe debt, and an inability to communicate honestly. The pressure to keep up appearances can isolate individuals, making them feel that their only options are total public humiliation or extreme, unlawful acts. By studying these dynamics, societies can learn to foster environments where seeking financial counseling, marital therapy, or mental health support is normalized and encouraged, thereby reducing the desperation that leads to such tragedies. From an investigative standpoint, this case underscores the supreme importance of detail-oriented forensic science. The perpetrator believed her professional medical background would allow her to commit a seamless crime, yet her overconfidence proved to be her ultimate undoing. She failed to consider the fundamental laws of human biology. The most critical clue that cracked the case was the complete absence of smoke inhalation in the victim's lungs. Science does not lie. A living person trapped in a fire will inevitably breathe in carbon monoxide and soot. The lack of these substances proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Timothy was already deceased before the fire was set. This single scientific truth demolished her entire timeline and exposed her staging of the scene. Furthermore, the investigators' reliance on physical anomalies at the crime scene demonstrated the value of healthy skepticism. Disabled smoke alarms, Vakep-Ite hat batteries neatly removed and untouched by fire alongside a misplaced candle immediately signaled to the police that this was not an accidental electrical fire. The integration of modern technology, such as the location tracking application on a coworker's phone, bank surveillance footage, and precise digital timestamps of automated teller machine transactions, allowed the police to build an airtight, objective timeline that exposed the perpetrator's falsehoods. This demonstrates how the combination of classical detective work, physical evidence, and digital forensics is essential in solving complex modern crimes. There are profound life lessons to be drawn from this tragedy to prevent future occurrences. First and foremost, communities must prioritize authentic human connection over superficial displays of wealth and status. Encouraging open conversations about financial struggles, relationship counseling, and mental health can alleviate the crushing pressure of keeping up appearances. Additionally, healthcare institutions must implement stricter auditing and disposal protocols for highly controlled substances like propofol, ensuring that discarded medical supplies are securely destroyed and accounted for can prevent individuals from abusing their professional access to carry out illicit acts. For law enforcement agencies, this case offers valuable experiences on how to expedite investigations and secure justice swiftly. Establishing a strong rapport with the victim's family and the local community is paramount, as demonstrated by the crucial information provided by the victim's son and the close friend who recalled the perpetrator's prior verbal threats. Gathering these testimonies early, combined with a rapid request for specialized toxicological testing when a medical professional is a person of interest, can prevent critical evidence from being lost. Ultimately, this case serves as a powerful testament to the triumph of justice, showing that the dedicated, systematic efforts of a community's protective forces will always expose the truth and honor the memory of those who were lost.